On today's Newsmakers, surviving terror, battling evil, and Trump's Gaza stance, that and more coming up. Welcome to Newsmakers, a show where we go behind the headlines each and every week to bring you interviews with pastors, entertainers, politicians, and other notable figures. On today's Newsmakers, we start with Pastor Jonathan Pokluda, who is here to explain spiritual warfare and to tell us why Christians should understand evil. Let's welcome him here to Newsmakers. You've got a new book, Your Story Has a Villain. Identify spiritual warfare and learn how to defeat the enemy. There's a lot to talk about on this topic, but I've got to start with this question. Why did you tackle this? Because it's a bold topic in many ways to tackle in our current culture.
It's really interesting. I was raised in church, went to church twice a week. I was raised Catholic. My mom was Lutheran. I was involved in the Lutheran church, the Catholic church, the Baptist church, went to Catholic school for 9 years and went to college, lived the kind of crazy college life. You know, they say drug, sex, and rock and roll. In my case, drug, sex, and hip hop. And then I graduated. I was in the world. I was at a club. Someone invited me to church. I went hungover, sat in the back row, and surrendered my life to Jesus. Like, just went all in with Jesus. And grew in the faith there, was discipled there. And being raised Catholic, I would see statues of, angels and demons. And I was taught in religion class about this spiritual war that was happening around me. And I knew the story in Genesis 3, the fall, the tempting of Satan in the Garden of Eden. But if this war was happening around us, I knew very little about it. And I didn't know what could happen. Like, people would say things like, oh, my car battery's dead, hashtag spiritual warfare. And I'm like, how do demons drain your car battery? Like, do they have to pop your hood? Like, what are their limitations? What can they do? And as I set out to get answers to that, it is almost like the Christian community was really comfortable not knowing the answers to that. And so I just did a deep dive on, what does the Bible actually teach us? Who are the experts? What have they said? What has been written on the topic? And it really was a 3-year journey. That was I did a teaching series on this that, turned into this book for such a time as this. If you write a book on dating, relationships, marriage, parenting, the felt needs, those books tend to do really well. This is a book about all of those things, really, because the spiritual warfare has implications for everything we do. It's a foundational truth to the Christian faith. And so that's what brought me here.
Yeah, well, and I got to tell you, this is a topic I have looked a lot at. I wrote a book on this in 2020, but more from sort of a journalistic perspective of, hey, what is this issue? What does the Bible say? What do we know to be true? Yeah. And I was blown away. And I've said this many times, people have heard me say it. I found it easier to get celebrities in Hollywood to endorse the book than I did some pastors. And there was nothing in this book that wasn't scriptural or wasn't. Yeah. It really shocked me. Why do you think it is that not all churches, right? Lots of churches deal with spiritual warfare, but why do you think many Christian communities avoid it and some pastors just sort of let it sit?
I think there's a Pentecostal thread that is really comfortable with the unseen realm, the spiritual realm. They're very comfortable talking about demonic possession or oppression, activity in general. But then there's a large majority of churches outside of that they just live in the mystery. And they would say, hey, that's gray. There's a lot we don't know there. It doesn't seem like we're operating in a time and an era similar to what Jesus was operating in when he would walk through a town and there would be someone possessed by a demon. Is that schizophrenia? Is that a demon? Is that mental illness? We can't know. And so in the absence of knowing, we're not really comfortable speaking with any level of clarity on such things. And so this is my journey. I was largely saved in a church that was largely cessationist, meaning we didn't talk about the Holy Spirit much or the things of the demonic realm, the spiritual realm. And I moved to Waco 5 years ago, And I found myself using words that I didn't use often in my spirituality, like strongholds. It seems like there's
Mm.
a stronghold here in Waco, and people would say, well, what do you mean by that? And then I'd have to explain myself. When as I explained myself, I had to get a new language around it, and really ultimately a clearer, more defined theology around it. And I think unless you've done that work, there's just a lot of discomfort with it.
Yeah, no, and that's actually really well said, because I hear that a lot. Well, we're living in a different time than when Jesus was here. Jesus, obviously being unique, the evil would sort of, present itself when he was around. But then you see Paul, you see others dealing with this in scripture, right? You have Ephesians 6 telling us you're in a battle, right? What dangers are there
Yeah.
to people saying, hey, we're not going to talk about it. We're just going to we're going to talk only about one half of the story.
Yeah, Billy, I believe that is spiritual warfare in and of itself. I think it was Reservoir Dogs, a movie somewhere along the road, and maybe even Batman, the Joker, said the greatest trick the devil has ever pulled is convincing the world he didn't exist.
Right.
And I think, C.S. Lewis said there are two errors that we make about the devils. One is to make too much of them, believing that they are involved in everything, and the second, which is equally as dangerous, is to not even acknowledge their existence. I think there's a third error that we make today. The more popular error of this century would be believing that there is a demonic realm, and that belief having zero implications of anything that we do. If there's a fire that sweeps through a neighborhood, I don't know that we're going to be able to say with certainty that there was a demon behind that fire, but we can say with certainty that the demonic realm is using that fire to steal, kill, and destroy.
Right.
And ultimately, behind every fire and every cancer and every anxiety, it is spiritual in the sense that it wouldn't exist had Genesis 3 not happened. And so had the fall of creation not occurred, there would be no cancer, there would be no anxiety, there would be no depression, there would be no hurricanes or fires. And so in that sense, absolutely, there's the demons behind such disasters and things.
Well, I know this book is going to inspire a lot of people. It's Your Story Has a Villain: Identify Spiritual Warfare and Learn How to Defeat the Enemy. Appreciate you taking the time today.
Absolutely, Billy. Thanks so much for telling the story and asking great questions.
You can get copies of Your Story Has a Villain, Identify Spiritual Warfare, and Learn How to Defeat the Enemy wherever books are sold. We'll be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers.
And I slipped. I couldn't use the whole right side of my body.
I went from having a promising career as a neuroscientist to having a medical death sentence. People would pray for me, and sometimes it felt like this power that just zapped me.
So how do you know this wasn't psychosomatic, a misdiagnosis, something that was being missed in that process? Are miracles real? Do they happen today? Let's investigate.
Welcome back to Newsmakers. Next up, we speak with Kathy Tenedorio, whose son Matthew was killed in the New Orleans terror attack. She joins us to share how her faith is sustaining her and what it was like to see the Super Bowl honor her son's life. Let's welcome Kathy to Newsmakers to share her story. Kathy, it has been over a month now since your son Matthew was killed during the New Orleans terror attack. And you and I spoke weeks ago. A lot has happened in the time since we last spoke. How are you holding up?
As best as I can. I go to church every Sunday. I read my Bible. I pray. I'm just, holding on to my faith. That's the main thing. That's all you have to hold on to, and your loved ones, family and friends, and been back at work, and my husband's gone back to work, and
trying to move forward in life in a new normal that is not what your normal was a month and a half ago.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
One of the big things that has happened as we're having this conversation just hours ago, your son and the other victims, they were honored at the Super Bowl. You were there. Talk about that experience. I mean, it looked very moving.
It it was very moving. It was we were invited to be part of course, just a sports experience that is off the charts, the Super Bowl. So, and they honored the 14 victims, the first responders. They invited two families, the Tenedorio family and the Besh family, and that's such a wonderful family. I met the mom and dad for the first time. Their 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 son Tiger's best friend Ryan, he was injured. They were on the first block of Bourbon when the truck first came on, turned onto the street. They were hit instantly. Tiger was killed instantly. The friend, he said, I woke up in the hospital. I didn't know what happened. I didn't remember anything. And his leg is broken and just all kinds of things. It was his first time visiting New Orleans. It's so sad. And he never wanted to come back again, but he lives in New York City, and the Philadelphia Eagles invited him, said, please, all expense paid, we'll bring you to the game. And once they found out they were in the playoffs. Anyway, my whole point of telling you this is he was so kind and cried and said, why did I live? Kind of. It was just beautiful. It was just beautiful.
And really the fact that they chose to do that, the NFL, that they chose to take this moment and honor your son and the other victims.
Yes.
And you were on the field as well, because you guys were the honorary captains at the toss. I mean, what does that mean to you? Just like you've gone through so much.
It's very comforting, and it just makes me feel special. And it breaks my heart for other parents who experience this loss, or family members, and don't have this big attention. And I just always think of others. I always think about how I'm so blessed. I'm very, very honored and blessed. I'm very humbled by it. And I just, wish this could happen for everyone, that everyone's life was celebrated like my son's life has been.
I have to ask you as a final question here, because people are hearing you and how strong you are in talking about these details. They've seen you do this now numerous times in media. You've been very open. You've spoken with us twice. What would you tell people if they're struggling with something in their life, if they're going through a loss and they're really having a hard time, and here you are, you have this strength and you're persevering? What is it that you would tell them? What advice would you give them to find that same strength?
I would just say, you just have to go on. You have to live your life, and to be the best person that you can for the benefit of others, because we're not here just for ourselves. There is a purpose. And if you don't know what your purpose is, there's a saying that I just love, and it says, if God is making you wait, do what waiters do, you serve. Okay? You just have to your purpose just could be just to help your parents in your everyday life, or your children. Do the right thing with your children and help them be the best that they could be with their school. And that it might just be an everyday thing, but just take one step at a time, move forward. If it's a drug addiction, people that overcome drug addiction, they're my heroes, because they stare at a beast every single day. And just to get over that, to face that every day. I don't have that issue, but I know people that do, and they're my heroes. They really are.
Yeah,
If
well,
you can be sober and get through that, to hold on.
well,
But
Kathy,
one day,
For a lot of people, you're their hero right now. And I
No.
mean that. I mean that. I think the way that you've carried yourself is
I hope I can
incredible.
inspire people. Yes. Not to give up.
Absolutely.
And just
Absolutely.
move forward.
And that's what you've done so beautifully. I appreciate you taking the time today. I really do.
Thank you, Billy. Thanks.
Thank you. Please keep Kathy and her family and all of those impacted by this tragic attack in your prayers. We'll be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel. For our final segment, we're sitting down with Pastor Jensen Franklin. He's here to share about his recent meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his take on President Donald Trump's Gaza stance. Let's welcome him here to Newsmakers. Now, you joined a group of evangelical leaders this week in meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This was a small group of leaders you were a part of. What can you tell us about the gathering?
Well, it was a tremendous honor to be a part. Mike Huckabee, I think, was the originator of the idea, which speaks, massively about who he is. By the way, he's the first evangelical Christian to occupy the office that he is taking over, as the ambassador to Israel. So that's pretty amazing to know that we have a former pastor, then governor, and now ambassador who is so pro-Israel. The first time I ever met Mike Huckabee was in the Holy Land. We were both on tours, and I really liked him. But I thought the timing of it, Billy, was so critical. It was the night before his meeting with Trump the next day, and President Trump. And of course, we have all seen the highlights of what has come out of that meeting that is just earth-shocking. I think all of us have our jaws dropped saying, wow. And you could feel in the room the weightiness of the moment. It felt like, not every moment is an equal opportunity moment. There are moments that change everything. And we just, he was very warm. He was so appreciative of the Christian community, of the Christian friends that he felt like had Israel's back when they're facing so much opposition, especially in universities and in the streets of major cities where the protesters are, screaming death to Israel and all of that, how the Christian church has been there. That was his real heart. He said, I first of all want to express my tremendous appreciation since October 7th, how Christians have been vocal. And he challenged us all to speak up and to stand with Israel, and that without the church, he said, without the Christian church, he did not believe that Israel would be existing today. And I thought that was a powerful statement, because
Wow.
he understands that evangelical Christian true Bible believing. He kept making a difference between drawing a difference between those who say that they're Christian and those who understand their roots are from the Bible, are Jewish roots. And so it was powerful. It's an amazing gathering.
As you were in this meeting, a lot of people have questions, right? So you were there, and I want you to answer this, because the biggest question, of course, for people who don't understand the relationship between Christians and Israel and Christians and Jewish people, those on the outside, they'll say, why should evangelicals support Israel? Why should we be at a meeting with Netanyahu? Explain why for those who don't understand.
Well, it's a great question, and it's one that every Christian needs to understand. It's so critical that Christians be educated in our spiritual roots. The Apostle Paul put it like this. He said, can the limb that is producing fruit say to the roots, I have no need of you? And then he likened and he asked the question, has God cast Israel away now that Messiah has come? Has God done away with the Jewish people? And should we just cut them off and say that's another faith that has nothing to do with us, so we're not interested? And Paul said, certainly not. He said, if you want to continue to produce fruit and be the branch that is reaching out to the world with the good news, You must stay connected to the roots. And what are the roots? The roots are the Jewish people. The Bible is a Bible that was, every author in it was a Jew. The law of Moses was the Jewish faith. Everything that is New Covenant has a base and has a type and shadow in the Old Covenant. You cannot separate the two. And of course, in Genesis 12 and verse 3, God said, and this is forever, this is a Bible principle and eternal law, I will bless those that bless Israel, and I will curse those that curse Israel. Not just the land of Israel. We don't just love the Holy Land, the land of Israel, where Jesus walked, talked, lived, was born, and died and rose again. We love that land, but we are called to love the people of Israel, because ultimately, and here's maybe the most powerful verse that any Christian can memorize when asked this question, John 4 and verse 22. Jesus himself said, salvation is of the Jews, meaning I would not be here, Jesus the Messiah, if it were not for the Jewish race and that tribe out of one of the tribes that God himself chose, the tribe of Judah, that Messiah would come. And Jesus said that in your Bible. Salvation, in other words, all the blessings of salvation that I have and you have been partakers of, we owe a tremendous debt to the Jewish people of appreciation and honor, because salvation is of the Jews. Amazing.
Well, that is an incredible place for us to close. Pastor, appreciate you taking the time and sharing your journey with Netanyahu and all of the events of this week with us. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm honored to be with you, Billy.
CBN News will continue to cover the crisis in the Middle East as new details unfold. We'll be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers. That's all for today's Newsmakers. Thank you for watching, and be sure to head on over to the CBN News YouTube channel. That's where you'll find the full interviews you saw on today's episode. Plus, you can check out our daily Newsmakers podcast, where we feature one full interview every single day. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. As for this show, we'll see you again next week.